Hello Bradford. I've gone to the trouble of making you this video, so please do me the courtesy of watching it. I have no doubt that your so-called scientists mocked me and tried to ridicule my statements when I left the spaces yesterday. That's what they do, because they cannot argue against the science. So here we go. Cancer is not a genetic disease. Ask your so-called scientists to show one genetic mutation that causes cancer. They won't be able to. They may quote the BRCA1 mutation, but that is a risk factor. It is not the cause of the disease. About 50% of people with the BRCA1 mutation don't go on to develop the disease. Therefore, it is not 100% penetrant. If cancer was a genetic disease caused by gene mutations, then how can we have some cancers with no mutations? Ask your scientists to explain that. Now, given your question about blood glucose, I presume they said that you can't get the blood glucose to zero. That's true. You'll be dead. There are some processes in the body that need glucose. However, you can starve the tumour cells of glucose by getting into a state of therapeutic ketosis. Here is the professor to explain.
And that's why we developed the glucose ketone index calculator, so patients can know exactly what they can and cannot eat. People say, what can you eat? Can I eat this? I don't care what you eat. What does it do to your GKI?
Yeah.
If it's, well, I can't get my, well, then stop eating that. I've had some people say, I was never able to get into the 2.0 or below until I stopped eating, just drank water. I said, yeah, now you know. I said, now you know.
Yeah.
But
so how long are you doing that? And where does gluconeogenesis fit in? Because aren't we designed to just make glucose if it's not introduced into our diet?
Yes, gluconeogenesis is the case, but the brain will suck up at whatever available glucose that you have. Very little goes to anywhere else. Muscles take it. Muscle and brain. Muscle does not share glucose. Muscle keeps it because we needed that for our evolutionary survival. If we're being chased by a lion or a bear, we need to have the energy to run away from it. And we need that energy. It's in the muscle. The muscle then starts running. If the muscle says, oh, my liver needs a little, or this a little bit, and all of a sudden the bear comes, we have no energy and the bear eats us. So this is not productive. So muscle does not share. So when you say gluconeogenesis, a lot of that's going to the muscle and a lot of it's going to the brain, and the cancer cell is not getting it.
Muscle and brain. Well, here's how.
Step one, get cleaned up, And by water-only fasting, zero carbohydrate diets, we slowly bring the body back into a new state of metabolic homeostasis. And then at Boston College here, we developed the glucose ketone index calculator, which is a ratio of blood glucose to blood ketones in the blood, circulating level of glucose to ketone. So what we have found, and this is diet irrelevant, what we have found, if a cancer patient can get the ratio down to 2.0 or below, preferably below, the tumor cells start to get hammered, because now you're putting them under incredible metabolic stress. And that will really downregulate the ability of the tumor cell to survive. But they can hang on because they're using some of that glutamine. So you come in with the pulse. And the pulsing now, you use glutamine targeting drugs while the patient is in nutritional ketosis under low glucose conditions. And gradually you start to tear down and break down the tumor. And as I said, also the diabetes goes away. High blood pressure goes away. Obesity goes away. All these things go away along with the cancer. So, and that's only because you're bringing your entire back to the body the way it should have been in the first place. And it's very hard to get cancer if your mitochondria remain healthy. We have seen this over and over again. So we're just essentially reconfiguring what metabolic health is, and we use small doses of drugs to target the glutamine. And yeah, we can use IV vitamin C. Once you're in nutritional ketosis, even conventional chemotherapies and radiation therapy will work. You can use much lower doses of chemo. and still get a tremendous therapeutic benefit when the body is in therapeutic ketosis.
So, practically, what does the patient do in order to get into this zone? They use a GKI meter called the Keto Mojo. Here's Owen, a cancer patient that was brutalized by the toxic treatments, who was sent home to get his affairs in order. He was given 3 months to live, and here he is, a year later, explaining how to measure your GKI.
All right, so first thing I want to do before I stab my finger is open up the strips. So the blue is the ketone strips, and this takes 9 seconds to measure, okay? And if you think that's fast, I actually kind of come to think it's kind of slow these days. So I like to have my strips ready to go. So I've got my ketones measure strip, and then I've got my glucose. The brown is going to measure my blood sugar. And I like to have these out so that I can easily put them in the device and use one prick of blood. I don't want to prick my finger multiple times. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put the glucose in first with the blue strip down, and it goes into the keto meter here, and you'll hear it kind of click. Well, there you go. There, it kind of clicked there. So it tells you now that it's ready to measure glucose. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load the finger prick, and I'm going to kind of let it start to bleed. And what I do is I push the blood up to it. I get a nice big bulbous, because I want this to be enough for both the strips, okay? So the first thing I'll do is I'll just let that blood touch the strip, and you'll see it's 5 seconds. And I'll get a reading of 67, which is not bad, considering I've been fasting all day and I just had a CT scan. Now we're gonna measure, okay? So I'm trying to keep the blood on my hand kind of like fresh, you know, and I'm gonna put the blue strip in, and now we're gonna measure ketones. It's gonna take 9 seconds, and I just kind of licked my finger here, you know. All right, 2.5 for the day. So this is really good. Now, here's the thing. These numbers by themselves are great, but the app on your phone brings them all together and allows you to see like your tracking. And if you don't have the Keto Mojo app, just go to the App Store and grab it. When I open up the app, immediately I'm coming to my readings. The first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click the sync button on the lower right-hand side. And what that does is it syncs with this device. So this device has to be on in order for this to work. And what'll happen is the last 4 readings, okay, are imported. I'm gonna click on the check sign, and I'm gonna scroll down, and I can see that 8:31, which is today, at 4:41 p.m., I have a GKI of 1.4, which is really good. That's where I wanna be. My glucose, you can see it in the brown, is at 67, and my ketones are at 2.5. So it's exactly the numbers that you saw here. But the app does a mathematical equation to give me a GKI, which is my glucose ketone index.
So how did the system become so broken? How did we get here? Here is the professor to explain.
It's not any different than a religion or a political persuasion. You're not going to get a person of Jewish religion to accept Islam any more than you're going to get someone who practices Islam to accept Judaism as this is what we call ideological dogma. It's a solidification of the brain's thinking along certain lines. And political, there's political things that Democrats, Republicans, but people are led into these ideological states, supported by a large amount of data, of course. When Warburg was battling this out in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, the field discovered DNA, and as the code directing protein and signaling sequences and activity, and everybody, like lemmings, ran off the cliff chasing all the code and the genes, and left Warburg behind. And the controversy that was associated with the biochemistry was left behind. And then, of course, several Nobel Prizes were awarded for oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes, and it made biology more quantitative. So everybody thought that was really cool and really exciting. And the NIH jumped into this bandwagon. And don't forget, in 1971, President Nixon declared the war on cancer, pushed by Mary Lasker, who said the government needs to play a bigger role in this cancer thing. So, and that was all pointed out in Sid Mukherjee's book, The Emperor of All Maladies. He does a very nice job about the history of cancer. But Nixon said, we're going to cure cancer, just, a big federal government project on this. And it wasn't happening as quickly as people thought, because that was 1971. And the cures weren't coming. So the NIH, National Cancer Institute, made a decision in 1984 that we should invite in the pharmaceutical companies that might accelerate the development of drugs. So that was 1984. The fox came into the henhouse in 1984. And then we started making all these different kinds of drugs, the genome projects. We started talking about precision medicine, personalized therapies, and all these kinds of things. And we said, people at that time felt that if we can map all the different mutations and chromosomal abnormalities in tumor cells, then we can make specific drugs to kill and target those things. Well, that never happened. It never happened because cancer is not a genetic disease, and it never will happen. So it's a massive detour that's unfortunately led to the inadvertent deaths of hundreds of millions of people around the world, because these drugs that were being developed from the pharmaceutical company, immunotherapies and all these kinds of things, they're all based on the somatic mutation theory. It's a genetic theory. It's not a genetic. I did nuclear transfer experiments. I did over and over. I did all kinds of experiments to show cancer cannot be a genetic disease. You have to be cognitively impaired or a dogmatic ideologue to think that this is the case. And yet
but there's an entire cancer industry based on that theory.
Yeah. So how's that working for us?
It's not working, but why don't people realize that it's not working?
Because it's the dogma and it's power. And if you go back and look at the history of theories of science, you can see it played out over and over again. The geocentric, heliocentric theory of the solar system, okay? That's where the people thought, and pushed by mostly theologians, that the Earth was the center of the solar system. And if you challenged, you could end up like Giordano Bruno, burned alive in one of the centers of Rome, one of the little squares in Rome, for his challenge of the theologians that no, the sun is the center of the solar system based on the Copernican model. Galileo used the telescope to support Copernicus, and he was house arrested. He would have been executed as well had he not had political connections. And then you had Kepler putting the orbits into more accurate terms. Eventually, the geocentric theory that the Earth was the center of the collapsed. And now we know the sun is the center of the solar system. But it took centuries for people to see the data and look at it. You can look at the germ theory of Louis Pasteur. He was brutalized by the medical community to say germs that you couldn't see were responsible for all these infectious kinds of diseases. Brutalized. And then you have Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. And even to this day, people can't even understand that. So these theories are foundational. They change. But let me tell you something. In none of those theories, whether it was the heliocentric, geocentric, whether it was the germ theory, or whether it was this theory of evolution, whether you accepted or did not accept those theories, was not responsible for over 1,650 people a day dying. So as we speak here in an hour, 70 people will be dead from cancer. And they're dead from cancer because the theory under which the disease is viewed is incorrect. And once you understand that it's a metabolic disease caused by mitochondrial dysfunction, forcing into a fermentation metabolism, the strategies for managing cancer will be completely different, non-toxic, and powerfully therapeutic.
Does it work? Well, take a look at this video with Dennis Stacey.